everybody, this is Rhea and you're listening to Fact or Myth. It's me, Tautology. Today's podcast series we were going to talk about the creation of myth and cross-cultural belief. Today we share to you some of myth histories as well as stories, such as Genesis, the story of creation, the creation of the world and the birth of the Titans. Filipino creation stories are some of those. But what are they? What are they about? Well, it explained the world and a man's experience as well. Myths are as relevant in today as they were in the ancient. At the same time, it serves as compass to each generation. So, together with me as we navigate you to the current or to the ancient world. Together with me is Kent, Mika, Jazel, Nick, and me myself, and many more. So, don't leave, just listen. Hang on as we get it on. And the first up is Genesis. So, Rhea and Jessa, you lead the way.
Everyone, welcome to the show. Today, in this episode, we will be talking about Genesis. So keep in tune as we begin.
The language of creation is a commentary of primeval stories from the book of Genesis. It is often difficult to recognize the spiritual wisdom contained in these narratives because the current scientific worldview is deeply rooted in materialism. Therefore, instead of looking at these stories through the lens of modern academic disciplines such as sociology, psychology, or the physical science, this commentary attempts to interpret the Bible from its own cosmological perspective by contemplating the ancient biblical model of the universe. The language of creation demonstrates why these stories are fundamental to Western science and civilizations. It rediscovered the archaic cosmic patterns of heaven, earth, time, and space, sees them repeat at different levels of reality rather. This fractal-like structure are first encountered in the narrative of creation, then in the stories of the Garden of Eden, Cain and Abel, and the flood. The same patterns also revealed in the vision of Ezekiel, the book of Daniel, and the miracles of Moses. This book has fundamental concern to get people thinking about symbolism, thinking about the world and cosmology differently. When we think about cosmology in modern age, we believe in a very scientific perspective. And within that scientific perspective, we have the matter, which is pretty fungible and exchangeable. Then we have this universal laws that operates upon it. And we focus narrowly upon the questions of what is something made from and how does it work? Maybe contrast biblical cosmology describes reality at a very different sort of level. It is not focused upon same kind of things that science focuses on. Instead, it is focused upon questions of meaning, and it operates very much at the level of deep human perception and engagement within the world. It is more attentive to sensitive questions as it recognizes deep analogies between levels of reality and connections between things. It is something that comes out in Fajot's work. This way, that scriptures work. As a mediator of heaven and earth, mankind is supposed to bring heaven and earth its pattern down to earth, to bring heavenly meaning and impose it upon earth, and raise up the flesh of the earth and direct it towards the heaven. For an instance, we see mankind naming the animals. In naming the animals, mankind is bringing the heavenly order down upon the earth. And then in sacrificing animals, mankind is raising those animals up into the heaven. Mankind is taking earth into his body through nutrition. It's like the way language takes the marks on a page and brings them into order of meaning. For humans, it is also important to remember that breathing involves the ability to speak, which makes it a vehicle of language and information. Thus, in human microcosm, Adam's heads represent the principle, the first principle, which is the wisdom, as the source of meaning for the body, and the role of the head is to provide a unifying principle to answer the dark or subconscious. And also, that's why Adam lowers meaning down into the world and raises up matter. There is downward movement of informing and upward movement of expressing. In each one of these levels, we see analogies flowing between them. It is also connected to things like law and deed. The law is the principle that comes down, and the deed is the body that expresses it. There are problems that can come with just have the pure law, the dazzling light of the pure law, which has not been expressed by the matter. What you need is for the law to be made clear through many different cases, and those cases can make situations clear by bringing the light to bear upon them. But they also enable us to see the light with more distinction, because it is not just dazzling. It enables us to see the specific case and how justice applies is in this specific case, and that's how it is expression of the core light of the law. But without being dazzled by that, the core principle is expressed through the case law, like sending breath out into the body. There are a couple of statements that's helpful. Law brings light and the meaning to human events, and the human questions or problem provide and got tangible expression for God's Spirit, and the loss is analogous to a tree that did to its fruit. These fruit are concrete facts that point to a higher identity, or fruits with their seeds in them. Consequently, you know that identity of the seeds through the fruit is the core thing that is express its material expression. That more abstract principle, that's fine principle that gets expressed the more concrete way. There is a fundamental core in this argument, and the very heart of this argument is very convincing. Unfortunately, many readers will not get this. Many of them can readily be arrived at independently and otherwise. Getting back to Cain and Abel, he talks about, for an instance, Cain being related to the earth rather. He does not mention his name. I do not think, but his name is related to the earth with a Smith connection. And Abel is related to heavens. Again, Abel's name relates to Hebel or vapor or breath. For Fazio, those connections are played out in terms of being a keeper of sheep and other raising up food from the earth. The relationship between them is expressed in their sacrifices as well, expressing through realities. He is very thoughtful, provoking on a number of things. And yeah, he also points out the relationship between sons of Noah. There is one area where he is very thought-provoking and perhaps a bit conversational. He talks about northern heights of Japheth in the southern depths of Ham and the realm in between of Shem. Another example is this. It's like Cain, the descendants of Ham are kingly prototypes created the building and the first cities and rolling over power empires. Nimrod is called a hunter, which points to his ability to kill wild animals as opposed to pasturing domesticated animals. This is the expression of power in contrast with authority, an important pattern that is repeated in the relationship between Jacob and Esau. This pattern's representation of conflicted relationship between Cain and Abel, which is itself a representation of relationship between earth and heaven. This reiterated patterns, earthly power versus heavenly authority, are reflected in geographical of biblical narrative. Fazio relates this to God as the creator of heaven and earth, and then God as the creator of time and space. According to the second pattern, he writes, God is the source of two different influences. One is a positive expression of God's identity, and the other one a negative retraction or concealment of God's identity. God's influence as the creator of space is analogous of pillar of a house, and God's influence as the creator of time is analogous to the axle of a wheel. The first firmly attached to the positive foundation, and the second is loosely attached to the empty hub of a wheel. One is power that builds a consistent and stable reality, and the other is the mystery that subverts and overturns existing reality and consistency and confusion. The purity system that we see within the scripture is, in many respects, an attempt to establish stability and order and remove elements that unsettle order, leaving them as reminders outside. It is not totalizing thing. It recognizes reminder for the things outside the camp. It is not attempt to totalize an order, but rather it is attempt to have a realm within which order exists, leaving a space for a reminder and not just doing away with any reminder. There are still areas that we will be flooded. There are still areas mystery and uncertainty. There are still areas that are hebel or vapor that we cannot grasp and control. But yet, wisdom as the core principle brings light, and it helps to understand the core realities around which we can make sense of things. And the Puritan system is very establishing that order within the life of Israel. This is leniency that is rigor within God's ordering, and so allowing for loosening of things by time. Rigor is establishing order and structure, the danger of too far in one direction and the other direction of order in the sort of, on the other hand, where there is looseness, there is disorder, and there is no consistency. Things do not hold. Things are constantly breaking down. There's no consistency, rather, of the self. There's no consistency of the social order, or etc. And so, it is establishing a balanced time and space, and is very important within Fajot's argument. And that relationship between time and space is expressed in things like work and rest. And like work and rest. And rationally, had a place where the principal spirits at work and body were strength and the matter power of all at work come together. These meeting points, head and body, where all those principles are related to each other. Some of more controversial points, which again fit strongly with some biblical terms, are the male association with space, construction, formation, and imposition of reason, and the female association within phenomenological cosmology. The man represents the order of the seed that gives life to a child that is given matter, the body of the woman. These are all themes that play out in important ways within Genesis, particularly within the first 3 chapters to understand the view of male and female within Scripture. It is also important to understand some of these dynamics because they are developed in great many ways. It is one of the reasons why we see the association of woman closely with the death and resurrection of Christ, or why there is such focus upon woman at the dawn of the narrative. It is worth thinking about this connection. Deeper symbolism of human existence, the way this plays out a level of or reality. We experience the world at a deep level in these ways. Our body creates template for understanding the world. These other things are play when we experience reality. For an instance, right hand and left hand, the way what we think of representing things at higher principle. These example basic ways which we order world around our body around certain patterns. The world is being understood from a rooted situation. Yes. Extreme time and extreme space both lead to judgment, the establishment of radical disorder, and the breaking of boundaries on the one hand, then on the other hand, an establishment of extreme integration, a false integration. For an instance, the Tower of Babel would be an example of this. The establishment of radical confusion would be an example of this two of the sons of men with the daughters of a woman prior to the flood. Both of these examples are breaking apart from the proper order, the dry land and the waters within this more general symbolic paradigm that Fajot is presenting. There are points where he makes some very controversial claim. I think one of the claim is that we're thinking about not dismissing thoughtlessly as there is something more to it, is when he writes like the concept of the grace and the Sabbath. The rainbow symbolizes the elevation of space by the realization that God is the principle of time and space, straight and crooked, familiar and foreign, rational and irrational, revealed and hidden, true or false, and good and bad, etc. I will no longer curse the ground for humanity's sake, nor will I destroy everything alive again. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. This quote is from Genesis verse 8 to 21. The realization quoted above implies about this quote is that evil is inherently part of humanity, which means a certain degree of wrong must be acknowledged for its perfection. More precisely, there exists a higher reality, a metaphase in which a certain degree of lower evil that can be transmuted in a higher good for the knowledge of God. There is a spiritual truth that Adam and Eve were not equipped to handle in the Garden of Eden, which led to their death. Heaven is associated with breath, earth is associated with body, and time is associated with blood. With the flow of blood that gives life and this sort of things, space is associated with bones and those things that give structures order. The human is the microcosm of all these in relationship to each other. It is the way in which there is significant variation. It is the fundamental order of the type or the symbol that enables us to see the significance of variation, because the significant variation is that which plays with the fundamental order that construes in a particular way. It is a specific conjugation of that underlying pattern. His ability to simultaneously express universal truth at different levels is the main reason why biblical narratives transcend the duality of literal and figurative interpretations. This seems like a necessary step to salvage biblical cosmology from the scientific worldview. Hopefully, the true symbolism has been provided in order for us as a reader to interpret any story, law, or ritual from the Bible with insight from the language of creation. There is a great deal more within that I may not mention, but you must, if you have time, then you must look it for you must look that for yourself by reading the book. I recommend you to read the book and find it yourself. I think that would be all. Thank you. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted. Rate and review this podcast and share it to your friends. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you're living with some great things that can help you. Until next time.